So good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us on this cold morning ahead of the budget this afternoon. So I'm excited to deliver our Capital Markets Day today. So we've got a packed agenda for you today. So first of all, you're going to hear from me, Mark Boggett, for those who haven't met me before. I'm the CEO and one of the two co-founders at Seraphim. I'm going to give you a sort of our view of the market and how we've seen things change during the course of the last 10 years and positioning the portfolio now. Next of all, we've got the person in the UK that's got the best job title, the Commander of UK Space Command. Paul Tedman is going to be speaking to us about defence and about the role that space plays in defence. And then the star of the show, we've got Steve Young from ICEYE, who's going to do a Fireside Chat with James Bruegger and bring you up to date on what's going on with our leading portfolio company. Then we'll wrap up and have some more networking time before we all disappear back to our desks. So with that, I will get started. Let me kick off by introducing the extent of our senior personnel. We've got a really big team of very experienced people with very complementary skill sets. We're spread across the UK, the US, and Europe. And many of the people that you can see here are responsible for founding, funding, and growing many of the world's largest space companies. So let me just pick a few out for your information there. So Candace Johnson is the founder of SES, Europe's largest space business. Marco Fuchs is the founder of OHB, the largest German space manufacturer. Patrick McCall, Richard Branson's right-hand man of 25 years, on the board at OneWeb, Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit. Matt O'Connell is the founder of GeoEye, an Earth observation business that he sold for over $1 billion. And Dylan Taylor, founder of Voyager, a space station business valued in billions of dollars. So all of these people in our broader team builds out Seraphim credentials that really nobody else can match. We've invested in more companies. We've successfully founded and scaled more space companies than any other team. So Seraphim has just last month celebrated our 10th anniversary. So I wanted to take a few minutes really looking at what we've achieved over the last decade. So this slide, which you may find a little difficult to read from the back, but it calls out a range of our experiences during the period of time that sort of really marks us out as pioneers with firsts. You know, we launched the world's first space VC, 2016. We launched the world's first and only listed space growth fund in 2021. We run the world's largest space accelerator program. We've invested into 42 companies in total from our 3 funds to date, and we've achieved 7 unicorns. We've had 5 IPOs, trade sale, and only 4 failures. So, and all of this has been delivered from a team here in the UK. So we're proud of being pioneers in this global industry run from the UK. So the other thing I wanted to do was really step back over the last decade and help everyone understand why James Bruegger and I decided to found the world's first investment group focused on space. It's because we saw that space is a multi-decade, multi-trillion-dollar market opportunity, and one in which we believe holds the same analogous potential as AI. Now, I appreciate that is a really bold statement, but we believe that space is going to have a profound impact on our world as much as AI, and in the process, creating a $1 trillion investment opportunity. So how much of the $100 trillion global economy is going to be impacted by space? And the answer to that we believe, is virtually all of it. So how much, when you think about energy from space, energy generation, natural resources, manufacturing, even life sciences, this may all sound like science fiction, but there are literally thousands of startups around the world tirelessly making this into science fact. The scale of the opportunity represented by space is also interesting to see that some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, such as Musk and Bezos, they're pouring the wealth that they've created through the internet into space. And we believe that the opportunity is ginormous. So 10 years ago, the new space revolution was still in its infancy. Just a handful of companies existing, led by SpaceX, that were making inroads into this market. So if you fast forward to today, we've seen the 100x fall in the cost of accessing space. This is through the advent of reusable rockets. Last year, there was a launch every 34 hours. Next year, we believe that Starship is going to come and become available commercially. We expect that is going to take the price down between 50% and 70% from its low cost today. So there's further to go. Satellites have been miniaturized, made out of the same components in your smartphones, laptops, and other electric cars. So the promise that led us to establishing Seraphim a decade ago is now being delivered upon. We now have numerous companies that have launched their constellations and are now starting to have a wide impact on the world. The market's now at a critical inflection point, with more than half of the satellites launched ever since the 1950s being launched since 2020. And just a handful of companies are responsible so far for building this digital network in the sky. Now, this is all now being industrialized, and every analyst is forecasting that there's going to be 100,000 or more satellites in orbit during the next decade, another 10x of growth of where we are today. And we see that very clearly, the build-out of this digital infrastructure. So the market is evolving very rapidly. And I thought that I'll just take a few minutes just to help you understand how we see this playing out. So Space 2.0, large constellations of satellites that are creating this new digital infrastructure in the sky. They're providing real-time insights on every square meter of the planet. And think about how the fusion of AI with this data set is really going to reshape entire sectors. It's going to unlock new applications, and it's catalyzing megatrends, including climate and, of course, now defense. Space 3.0 is the next phase of growth. This is about building infrastructure in the space environment. The new Starship from SpaceX is going to be a catalyst of this, being able to lift 100 tons into space in a single launch. You can launch entire constellations or really start to build some of these big industrial applications, such as cell towers in space, such as data centers in space, on-orbit compute, internet communications, and data relay. Then we've got sustainable space, space debris removal, satellite services, situational awareness, particularly in the defense domain. And then we've got new platforms for R&D, and in particular, manufacturing. And one of the areas that we're particularly focused on through our venture fund is around new materials and in particular biopharma in space. And then we've got Space 4.0 looking out even further. So this is not really an area that we're investing in at the moment because we're really focused on space where it serves Earth. But this is what's coming down the line during the next 5, 10 years. And it's things like space-based solar energy, building solar farms in the space environment for the sun to deliver more energy than sustainably to meet the requirements of our ever-digital world. We've then got lunar and asteroid resources. We really need to find replacements for rare earth materials, and we know that they're out there within the space environment. And then you've got real estate. Commercial space stations are already here today. We're already invested in companies like Voyager. But that's going to give way to space tourism, lunar habitation, and everything that goes beyond that. So we're not investing in this area at the moment. We're keeping a careful look and working with early stage companies, but not investing this through SSIT. But hopefully that gives you a real flavour of how this market's going to continue to evolve. There's a clear pathway for the space sector to become a multi-trillion-dollar industry over the next decade. And we see these new capabilities that are being launched right now. We're unlocking an entire new generation of greenfield opportunities that we have systematically established our business to be able to address. And I'll talk more about that in a minute. So again, where this journey started 10 years ago, there were relatively few other investors. This was one of our sort of key concerns about setting up a business focused on space. Now the market is booming. So this chart you may have seen many times before. It's drawn from our quarterly published space index that monitors globally all of the private investment into the space market. And we monitor the number of deals that are done and the value invested. So we're now at record levels of investment. So in fact, in the last quarter, 3.5 billion invested is the biggest quarter ever, and we've now beat the 2021 record. So, but also there's a record number of deals being done every single month. Hundreds of VCs that we've already co-invested with, and many, many more are now very actively investing in this area. Indeed, whole new streams of investors are coming into this market thanks to its dual-use characteristics. So private equity, sovereign wealth funds, corporates from every single sector are now heavily investing into this area. And this is the reason why the records are being set, but we believe we're really still only at the very beginning of the growth cycle. So this next slide is one of our most important slides for you to understand. And it's really about how we play this market opportunity. So over the last decade, we've built a deep network spanning all parts of the space market. We've painstakingly built a global profile. And this helps us generate deal flow in all parts of the market, in all stages. And this helps us build conviction earlier than other investors. Whenever we see a business that's approached to us through our deal flow, we're able to immediately look at the 9 or 10 other competitors and evaluate these private companies side by side. When we see new technology, we know with conviction immediately that we've not seen one of those companies before, and we're able to then positively, with conviction, invest into that business and help that business start to scale. So this is the model that we've built to support the most fearless of space tech entrepreneurs at every stage of their journey. We have our accelerator program, our private venture fund, and we have the SSIT growth fund. We funnel thousands of companies through the various stages of these complementary activities. And the aim is to create privileged insight to access every best growth stage business so that it can then be triaged into SSIT. So all of the future-looking areas of space that we've just been talked about, we can work with those companies at the earlier stages and work them through the accelerator, through the venture fund, and then eventually into the growth stage of SSIT. So we're very proud of the portfolio that we've built at SSIT over the last 4 years since we IPO'd. We believe we're delivering on the strategy and the objectives that we set at the time of the IPO, other than providing you the 20% return. We believe that that will come and that the portfolio is positioned to be able to do that because we are very well aligned to benefit from the huge secular tailwinds driven by the sector. And that really is defense and climate. So this is a chart that shows the NAV performance since our IPO. So we've managed to sustain the NAV in the face of an extremely challenging macroeconomic environment. We also bore the brunt of the underperforming listing holdings that we acquired at the time of SSIT's IPO. We've now posted successive quarters of record NAV, and we firmly believe that this performance of the fund has now turned a corner and is set for sustainable growth in the quarters and the years ahead. So this is a chart that's from our own management pack that we use to evaluate the performance. The performance of our portfolio has so far been driven by a handful of star assets, including ICEYE and Hawkeye 360. But what we're excited about is the tremendous growth potential in the other holdings. So these companies are quietly getting on with putting their first satellites into orbit, getting them working, identifying customers, putting their second, third, and fourth satellites into orbit, getting them working, identifying more customers, then winning those customers, and then those customers' contracts turning into revenues. And that is really when you start to see the benefit of those businesses start to grow. So that activity has been going on at industrial scale across our portfolio for the last 4 years. And what you're now starting to see, first of all with ICEYE, now with Hawkeye 360, is these numbers starting to come through in the portfolio. We're really confident that there are numerous companies at the bottom left-hand corner there that are rapidly going to start showing growth. We've highlighted some of them yesterday during our quarterly update. So this is my final slide. So thank you for indulging me in a look back over the last 10 years and where we are today. But hopefully it's very clear that we believe that space tech represents one of the most compelling investment opportunities over the next decade. The opportunities for investing have never been greater, and the prospects for SSIT have never been brighter. So we appreciate everybody in this room taking time to come and see us today, and we appreciate your support, and we're really looking forward to working with you as we go through our next phase of growth. So I'm excited to now introduce General Paul Tedman, CBE, the Commander of UK Space Command, who's going to talk to us about his view of UK space and defence. So Paul, can I bring you to the podium? Thank you. So you just click into that.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a great privilege to be here against such august company as well. So I'm delighted, particularly on Budget Day. I guess my brief really is to explain the national security and defence demand signal that is emerging and indeed already exists. And to do that, I've got 4 slides and about 10 minutes, so you'll forgive me, I'm going to go at a little bit of pace. But hopefully I'll bring it to life for you and give you my perspective on why space is now so important for national security and defence. Let me start with this slide. And I think it's really important that you recognise that we now see space not just as a tech sector, but as a domain of strategic importance for our economy, for our prosperity, and for our military capability. I always quite like to indulge an audience with a little bit of a history lesson. So the UK deleted its space programme in 1971 under the Heath government. The only thing we didn't do was get rid of our satellite communications. And that was a good bet until 9/11 happened. When 9/11 happened, the hegemony that was the US that we'd relied upon for so many years turned its eye towards counterterrorism, and they took their eye off the ball in space. And so they deleted their space command. And so that assumption that we'd worked on for decades, that we'd get all of our space capability for the US, became unsafe. And that endured for about 15 years until we got through that global war on terror, came back to global power competition, and of course in that intervening period, particularly the Chinese, but also the Russians had developed their space portfolio and their capabilities at a rate that was absolutely phenomenal and caught us all out, to the point that space then became what we now call a contested domain, i.e. there is no hegemony anymore, it's completely contested. So I think that context is really important. And ever since then, we've been fighting to compete in space, and hence you can see all the investment that Mark's talked about earlier. The second thing that I think that's important about that history lesson is the tech's also increased throughout the years. Mark's touched on that really, really well. Not least the reduction in launch costs by about 100x over the years, which means that all the flags that are represented here, where space was a domain of really about 5 players internationally, it's now about a domain of about 80 players internationally. So there's more congestion in space. So it's competed and it's also congested. And of course, it's inherently dual use. So I'll tell you that about 80% of the capabilities that I use come from the commercial sector. There's very little that defense uses that can't also translate into commercial opportunities. So we like to now describe this as an era, not just a new space age, but a new era of astropolitics. Obviously, there's geopolitics, but I think astropolitics is a word that I've kind of anchored to. Some don't like it. I like to use it because people always remember it. And so I think we're in an era of astropolitics. So that's kind of the macro point. Some statistics around that, and this isn't my slide, this is a UK Space Agency slide. So defence expenditure last year, given all the geopolitics that we're facing at the moment, was up about 10%. It's hit about $2.7 trillion over the last year. The global space economy, as of today, is about 600 billion, with a forecast to rise to about 1.8 trillion by 2035. VC investment in European defence sector is also up and is about 50% increase from 2024, and is due to increase that growth, projected growth annually of about 10% over the next few years through to 2035. Importantly, though, this is the UK numbers. This is what I get paid to do. So I do 2 things. I protect and defend our national interests in space, and I deliver space capabilities to our armed forces. Why is that important? Well, protecting and defend our national capability is important because you can see the numbers there, particularly on a budget day today. It's actually about 20% of UK GDP is underpinned by space-based services, about £450 billion every year. So, of course, it's my job to ensure that that is assured. Really important that we put our arms around that and can assure that to the government. There's also revenue. So the UK space sector increases its revenue by about 19 billion a year. And you can see some of the numbers in terms of the actual sector. About 2,000 organisations employ about 55,000 people. And of course, you can scale this globally, but this is broadly the sector. And this has played through in all the government documents that you've seen recently in terms of the industrial strategy, the defence industrial strategy, and the strategic defence review. So I guess the message to take away is this is fundamentally important to our economy, our military capability, and our prosperity going forward. So what for defence? A bit closer to home for me than the numbers. That's all your area, not mine. I like to use this slide to sort of talk about the importance of space to the military. You know, most of you know, or some of you may know, that I was in the US before I took over this job. And I think the UK traditionally is focused on the right-hand side of the slide, what we call space support to operations. So that's where we can sense globally through ISR, where we can communicate globally using things like SATCOM and data relays, and where we can have precision effect with things like GPS, delivered guided munitions. That space support to operations is traditionally what we've focused on. But I think, given what I've said about that competed domain, the focus is rapidly shifting to the left-hand side of the slide here. And what I'd like to highlight here is that I talked about astrographic region. Well, that starts about 60 miles above us, 100 kilometres. So that's my domain. So on behalf of the Chief of Defence and the Prime Minister, I own that domain on your behalf, and I need to protect and defend it. So I always joke that I have the largest domain of any commander in the defence with the smallest amount of people in it. I think about 7 at the moment. The point to take away here is that traditionally we've focused on air supremacy to deliver freedom of manoeuvre in the land and the maritime environments. And indeed, that was a bit of a fight back in 1915. But of course, the argument was won to the point that in 1945, Montgomery, one of our finest soldiers, said, if we lose the war in the air, we'll lose the war and we'll lose it quickly. I think that now transcends up into space. And if we can't control the space domain, we'll really struggle to get control of the air domain, and we'll lose our freedom of manoeuvre in the land and maritime environment. If you want a really good example of that, it's Ukraine, where we don't have control of space in Ukraine, we don't have control of the air, and therefore it's a really bloody mess on the land and the maritime environment. So really important, I think, that you understand that there's 2 aspects to space that the military views its capabilities through. Space support to operations, really important, but also control of the domain, the triangle on the left. And accordingly, my job is to protect and defend our national interests, the triangle on the left, but also deliver space support to operations, the honeycomb on the right. And I think the important bit, and you'll note it goes all the way back to 2023 with a quote at the top, I think we're just getting there in the UK now, that when you get a naval officer who's the Vice Chief of Defence in the US saying that space has emerged as their most essential warfighting domain, you know it's important. And I think we're very close to that now in the UK. For those that read it, the Strategic Defence Review is published in April. We're hoping to get to the Defence Investment Plan this side of Christmas. You heard it here first. But that SDR has an independent chapter on space, chapter 7.5, which is the first time we've seen that, shows that we're bringing space to parity with the more traditional investment areas across defence and its importance to the government and the nation. My final slide, wrong one, sorry. So what for the capability thesis? What are we trying to do to bring that challenge to life through capability investment? So I talk about 3 vertically aligned stacks and outcomes that we're trying to achieve, which is on the right-hand side of the slide there. I don't like to talk requirements, I like problems-based acquisition. We give tech problems to commercial industry for investors then to invest in those technical solutions and come to us and say, here's the best way to do it. Rather than say, here's 1,000 requirements, can you come back and give me the answer to that? That would be a poor way of doing business, what we've always done over the years. So those vertically aligned stacks, which you can see in the Defence Review and what we're working on now, are threefold. Control of the domain, my triangle on the left-hand side of the slide, and then on the honeycomb, decision advantage. We need to be able to talk and make decisions globally, and then sense to understand and to strike. Military language, but that's to find things and then do something about them. And you can relate those, of course, to space capabilities. So space control, you need command and control nodes on the ground with software-defined decision solutions. You need data links and you need spacecraft that can deliver ISR, so find things in space, but also affect them. So that's a system of systems in our space control vertically aligned stack. You then have decision advantage. That's largely satellite communication. I think given the threat, we're rapidly moving off geostationary, big satellites, and we're looking at hybrid solutions now over multiple orbits as we go forward to give us that resilience that we need against the threat. And then finally, Sense is a program we call ICEYE, which is our national ISR constellation that allows us to target globally. Really important. I'll come to that. Overlaid on top of that is how we then procure capability, which you'll be interested in. We use this own, access, collaborate, then. Own I don't like. I think it's too binary, so I prefer nationally separable. And what I mean by that is we'll always contribute. When policy doesn't align, we'll pull it back so that we can have a sovereign capability. And so the Defence Review for us and our investment, government and defence investment, is all about what we need to own. What must I assure to the nation aligned against those 3 vertical stacks? The other 2 might be of more interest to you. There's a whole ton though, 80% of the capabilities I've said earlier, that we will access through commercial or collaborate with our allies to deliver. And I think that's really important to understand. So we'll own and buy the things that we must assure. Everything else we'll do through accessing through commercial or collaboration with our allies and partners. Let me just overlay ISR, so intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance, so Earth observation in tech language for space. So nationally separable, right now, I own 1 ISR satellite, woefully inadequate. We've got a program of record to build that out. Access, we spend about £50 million a year on commercial imagery. And collaboration, we get about £5 billion of commercial imagery from our American colleagues and friends. So you can see that's woefully out of kilter. And so we need to invest now in things that we are nationally separable in terms of our own capability to target and do more in terms of accessing through commercial. So hopefully that gives you a sense of where defence is going. Didn't have long. There's a sort of a macro, it's now a domain of strategic competition, well recognised across government. Defence realises it's got some gaps in its capability. It's been well recognised through the Defence Review. We've got a capability thesis that looks at 3 outcomes that we seek to achieve in defence, and there's a thesis in terms of where we need to invest and why we need to invest in it. So I'll just conclude, I think we're taking questions, by saying that I think space is now one of the most important defence interest areas, and we recognise that we need to do more to come to parity with the other domains and ensure we can protect and defend our national interests and deliver the services that the joint force is going to really need and rely on if it's going to compete globally into the future. Thanks very much for your time.
I thought we might just take a couple of questions if there is
cool.
any interest in the audience. Let's go with the first hand up over here.
Hi, thank you. Thank you very much. It was really interesting. If I could just ask, what exactly does it mean sort of to control space? As in, are you able to deny access to a particular area of sort of vehicles you don't want to be there? Or is that important to do so?
Great question. So it's about us being able to have freedom of manoeuvre at a time and place of our choosing, both so that we can operate with impunity with our own spacecraft and we can stop an adversary from doing the same.
One more question. Who's next? There we go.
Hi, Carl Christian Reiner, private investor. To own your own capabilities, obviously understand the satellite question, but launch capacity, I mean, that must also surely be of national interest.
Yeah, it's a great question. So what I didn't say just through time is that they're the outcomes that we see. Thank you for the question. There's a whole lot of horizontals that feed those, whether it be AI, quantum. I think launch is in there for us. I think my view into the Defence Review was that we have so little in terms of space architecture that we own at the moment. To invest in launch as a national capability would be slightly perverse at the moment. It's an absolute requirement for us, assured launch. But given where we are in terms of gaps in space control, gaps in ISR, gaps in SATCOM, we need to get the basic architectures right, and then we can look at the next generation of launch capabilities. And I think as we understand better in-service manufacturing, as Mark mentioned earlier, there is a view that you can sustain spacecraft for much longer. And as we go forward and the tech matures, 5 to 7 year lives where you need life cycle, where you need more launch, that again might evolve as we can sustain spacecraft for longer in orbit.
Thank you very much.
So I've just got 2 points before we finish. First of all, you've talked about the UK there. Is it safe to say that the gaps that and the deficits of capability that we have in the UK, is that played out across Europe? Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think it is. And if you haven't been watching the news, so the Germans, I think 2 months ago, announced 40 billion investment in military space capability between now and 2030. So they clearly recognised it and are investing in it. And 2 weeks ago, I was very privileged to be at the opening of the new French Space Command with President Macron. So the President was there. It gives you a sense of how important they think it is. And they announced £4.2 billion of investment in military space capability between now and 2030. So I think you can see a real vector now into trying to shore up some of these gaps, because the history lesson I outlined, where for all good reasons we have relied on our great friends in the US to deliver the domain for us, that's now not credible anymore. We need to do something about it.
Yeah. We opened an office in Berlin, sponsored the conference where the German defense minister made that announcement. We were the keynote that morning of that conference. Final point from me is that here in the UK, we've just appointed the armaments director, who is in charge of procurement for defence. And the person that they've chosen to do that is our friend Rupert Pearce, who's the ex-CEO of Inmarsat.
Yeah.
So what do we read into the fact that the most important procurement change in the history of procurement for defence, they've chosen a space guy to do that? Is there anything we should be reading into that?
Ooh, I'm not sure. What I would say, though, is that the NAD is trying to change the dynamics of the sector and make us a much better exploiter of technology, a better customer. We all recognise that the procurement model is silted up. It's not particularly agile, and we're not exploiting the technology to keep pace with the threat. And so we need to do something about that. I think having a space NAD is really helpful because he will intuitively understand that. And the second thing I'd say is that I also, under that new NAD, have volunteered to be the first portfolio we stand up. So the Space Systems portfolio will be the first portfolio delivered by Defence. We hope to have that up and running by the 1st of April next year. It'll be a multi-billion portfolio, and hopefully then we can move money with agility across the portfolio so that we can deliver these things at a time and place of our choosing.
That's a great point to finish on. Thank you very much, Commander. Okay, well, let's get on to the next part of today's event. So can I invite to the stage Steve Young and James Bruegger.
So I'm delighted to have Steve Young with us this morning. So Steve is the president of ICEYE's Satellite Mission Division. So as we've reported in results in recent quarters, ICEYE has had a fantastic year, as we'll come on and talk about, driven in no small part by the announcement of a slew of very large contracts from sovereign nations for procuring satellites. So that's the bit of the ICEYE business that Steve is president of. For those not familiar with ICEYE, it's our most important holding, representing more than a third of NAV at our latest results announced yesterday. The business is a relatively rare European headquartered global leader. So this business has the world's largest constellation of synthetic aperture radar satellites. So what is synthetic aperture radar? It's using radar to create synthetic images of the world. Why is that important? Because uniquely to that capability, you're able to capture imagery day and night, rain or shine, reliably. And as we'll come on and talk about from an intelligence gathering perspective, that is a key capability that other types of satellites can't match. So the business today has more than 50 satellites in orbit, employs nearly 1,000 people, spread across both the UK, Europe, Finland, where the business is headquartered, with offices in the US, the Middle East, and across Asia Pacific. So this is a genuinely global business that has been founded and scaled in Europe. So without further ado, welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
Grateful if you wouldn't mind just helping the audience understand a little bit about your background and your role at Seraphim.
Sure, great.
Role at Seraphim. Role at ICEYE.
Perfect, James. Thanks very much. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for coming. Particular thanks to the General for that incredible insight into what's going on in the UK. I think it's clear to everyone that space is of increasing importance. In my world, it's always been important, but it's now, I think, globally recognised. So, as James has said, Steve Young, president at ICEYE. My background is I'm a physicist by training. I then spent 15 years in the defence industry in companies like BAE Systems and Airbus, reaching the point of chief of staff for BAE as we were going through a corporate reorganisation. I've also spent another 12 years in the space domain. At one point, I was the sales director for a UK company called SSTL, Surrey Satellite Technology, some of you may have heard of. And we took that from around about 100 people to 500 people over the space of 7 years, and around about 10 million in revenue up to over 500 when I left after 6-7 years. So we did well with SSTL. During my time at BAE, I was trying to sell Typhoon jets to the Finns. And I came across, while I was running that office, I came across a small company called ICEYE. Now, at the time, it was a very small company, and I went out for dinner with the founder, a very, very persuasive young guy, thought what could possibly go wrong, and 7 years later, here I am. So I joined ICEYE to set up the commercial front end of the company. We hadn't sold anything at the time, and I was the first person to achieve any sale in ICEYE. It was a single image, and I sold it for €800. And today, we're signing contracts in the orders of several hundred million, as some of you will see if you follow our LinkedIn particularly. And we signed things like JVs with large organizations like Rheinmetall in Germany. And as James has alluded to, it's been a very, very successful year. This year, we've signed up contracts with Poland, with Finland, with Greece, with Portugal. We've got customers in the UAE, repeat business coming out of the UAE. Brazil has been a customer of ours. We've now just recently signed an agreement in Japan. You can see, and I've just talked about the JV with Rheinmetall in Germany, and the General mentioned just how much money the Germans are putting into space. So you can see that ICEYE is accelerating, and every Christmas, the CEO and I sit down for a kind of roundup of the year and talk about how crazy it's been. It gets crazier every year. It's just accelerating and accelerating.
Thanks, Steve. So as you've alluded to, 2025 has really been a landmark year for ICEYE as a business. announcing the slew of major contract wins that you've just referred to. So what's been the key to all of this success, and why is ICEYE winning all of these contracts?
Yeah, good question. Why is ICEYE having the success it's having? When I first arrived 6-7 years ago, and I met the founder, in their office was a box with a satellite in it. And it was going to be the second satellite that the company had ever launched, the first operational satellite. And I said to them at the time, if that is what I think that is, then you're sat on a gold mine. Because throughout my time in SSTL and other industries, and especially the defense industry, SAR, synthetic aperture radar, was a capability that was obviously required and everybody wanted, but wasn't available. You could buy a SAR satellite, but it was 300 million, it would take 5 years to build. Now SAR's great, and if you've got one, you can come over a particular place every 4 or 5 days, something like that. If you've got 50, now I can come over somewhere every few hours. Now I can do something completely different. Now people like General Tedman are very, very interested in what I can offer, because it offers a whole different level of capability. But nobody is going to buy 50 satellites at 300 million apiece. So there had to be a change. I dismissed it at the time as it wasn't going to happen. And then a few years later, along came ICEYE and said, yes, we've cracked it. We've made the innovation. We've got the technology now. We can build a low-cost, high-performance SAR satellite at scale. And I said to them at the time, this is 6-ish years ago, if that is true, I'm in. And it launched, and within a minute of the SpaceX launch being successful, the founder was on the phone saying, have you signed the contract yet? So I started, and here I am. And what has driven, I think, some of the success over the years, the acceleration, part of it absolutely is pace, is just speed. Part of it absolutely is the right capability at the right time. And it's by pace, I mean the speed at which we've been developing that technology. We got to a place now where we're at the legal limit we're allowed to be at for the resolution, that's the fine detail that you can see with the technology. And that limit is a frequency allocation limit from the International Telecommunications Union. The kit itself can go beyond that, but legally we've got a bandwidth we're allowed to use, so that's what we use. And that gives us anywhere between sort of 10, 15, 20 centimeters resolution on the ground, which is as far as we can go from a civil perspective.
Great, thanks, Steve. So that's some insight into what's brought ICEYE the success that it's had to date. Let's look forwards into the year ahead. So a lot of the success that you've been talking about is being driven by governments and defence specifically looking to procure sovereign capabilities. And I think given who the nations are that have been acquiring this year, particularly European countries, it isn't a stretch to assume that a lot of the demand is being driven by the conflict in Ukraine. So whether the latest round of peace negotiations, if that's what you can call them, come to fruition, can you help the audience understand why the opportunity for ICEYE in the context of these mission sales goes beyond just the conflict in Ukraine, and why you may believe that that is a sustained opportunity over not just 2026, but the years ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. So ICEYE was not set up as a defence company. That wasn't the intent. ICEYE was established as a civil company to look at changes on the surface of the Earth and to make that data freely available to whoever wished to use it so that they could put the applications and do whatever analytics and so on that they wished to do. That was where we started. And even today, we have a part of our business, we call it the solutions business, where we use the data from our own constellation to look at flooding and wildfires and natural disasters and support the insurance industry and governments and so on with all of those issues. We can see through clouds and see at night, so it's obviously very good for those sorts of things. Other applications like illegal fishing and oil spills and all those sorts of civil activities, that's where we started. It becomes very obvious very quickly that there's a very significant defense and security capability available when you've got that many satellites in orbit. And because of what happened a few years ago, the geopolitical situation, it's no surprise that government's focus shifted pretty quickly to the type of capability we've got. Now, what we are doing, obviously, is servicing that market, and we're using a lot of the revenue we get from that to continue to develop the civil and the dual use side of it. And to pick up on your point about the sustainability of it, the reality of the space industry and organizations that acquire in-orbit capability, be they commercial and civil organizations or governmental and defense and security organizations, those organizations only ever want more. You don't buy a constellation of 4 or 5 satellites and then 4 or 5 years later say, oh, that's all right, thanks, we've had enough now. That just doesn't happen. The only thing that happens is they say, that's been fantastic, can we have some more, please? So what we're seeing now, and I've always seen throughout my career, is the repeat business. In this room, people will want to talk about recurring revenue and things, I'm quite sure. Space absolutely is a recurring business. It might not be recurring on a quarterly basis, it's recurring on an annual basis. Typically for me, when we get the first set of satellites up for a customer's contract, within that first year, I'm starting the conversations about the repeat constellation. What are they going to do to replenish that capability? Why is it that within 4 or 5 years you can have some more satellites and they're probably 2 or 3 times the capability than the ones you launch, so you can do so much more with it. When you then add into that the continual revenue streams you can generate from the data, because that's what's ultimately important, it's the data and what you do with the data. That is then what drives this long-term sustainable business. And on top of all of that, we then have a constant relationship with those customers to train them, to support them, to help them develop their analytics and just build and build and build on what they've already got.
Great, thanks, Steve. So I guess we've been talking about the drivers behind the success of the business, and the fact that there are multiple pillars of growth for the business, both within the defence and intelligence domain, but also outside of that. So what's next for ICEYE, big picture? Where's this business heading?
Yes, good point. So in the SAR domain, synthetic radar satellite domain, ICEYE is accelerated ahead of all of the other companies worldwide. There is no company that's even close to catching where ICEYE is now. Not in the speed, in the scale, in the price points we can hit, and those sorts of things. We've also, alongside that, developed an understanding of how you build products off the back of that data products. And just having the data and doing some analytics on it, that is not enough. There's lots of companies that do that. That doesn't productize it. It's not scalable. It's taken us many years to get to the point where we've got scalable products off the data, and we use AI to help and so on. Data analytics, as it was 5 years ago, is very different now with AI, as a lot of people here will understand. So we're accelerating that side of it. We've also got to look at the reality that there are other capabilities. Now we've learned how you do these things quickly and how you do it cost effectively and how you do it at scale. We're applying that knowledge to other areas. Just to give a specific example, we recently launched what we call it the ISR cell. It's a shipping container with all of the stuff inside it that you need to operate your satellite constellation, and an antenna, a dish on a trailer at the back. And 9 months ago, that didn't exist. And now we have 4 of them operational. That's the speed with which we can go and talk to our customers, people like General Tedman, and say, what do you want? I want to be able to do it closer to my center of operations. Okay, what does that look like for you? Well, I need it to be transportable and so on. Okay, give us 6 months. And we turned up with 2 of these things in a field in Poland, and now we've got 4 of them out there in the field. So that's the speed at which we can do things. There are other capabilities that are sort of natural progressions from where we go with SAR that we'll bring to bear to the market over the coming weeks, months, and years. So keep an eye on our LinkedIn.
Very good. And maybe just an observation on dual use.
Yeah.
It's sort of a hot topic. Within certainly the investment, but I think increasingly the government domain. You've alluded to the fact that ICEYE started out really with a view of developing sort of civil capabilities, and have had very strong market pull in defence. Can you give me a sense of how, as someone who works for the business juggles those sort of competing demands and the dynamics of serving very different markets?
Yes.
Albeit with a common technology platform.
Yes, so they are very different markets. The reality of the timelines as well in those markets are very different. Defence and government stuff is long-term, very long-term. The sales cycles can go on for years sometimes, and in the civil domain, they can often just take months. So just those in themselves are very different. You need very different people with very different backgrounds. So, for example, in our insurance or the solutions business, when we're doing insurance products, we hired a bunch of people from insurance companies. It seems fairly obvious to say it, but you'd be surprised about the number of space companies that send a defense space guy into an insurance company and think they're going to get a contract. It just doesn't work. So we've addressed it in that way. What we've also done is we take people from each of the divisions and we pull them across the various parts of the business on a regular basis, so rotate people through, but it's very obvious there's a lot of synergies there. I'll give you an example. The AI tech that we use for sort of detection and classification of certain things, ships, tanks, aeroplanes and so on, we actually brought that across from what we were doing with wildfires and flooding. How do you get a satellite to tell you that that's the fire front, or that building is 50 centimetres underwater? Because that's what the insurance companies want to know, and they want to know it instantly. So once you've developed that, you can then apply that to say, well, okay, that was a helicopter, or actually that's where a helicopter was an hour ago because we can see the change in the ground where it's blown over the grass. So you can detect minute changes, and those algorithms don't care whether it's civil or military.
Great, so I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions, but to preempt one of the very obvious questions we're going to get asked about, there's been speculation in the press about a potential IPO for ICEYE. What, in your opinion, needs to happen before ICEYE IPOs, if indeed that is what's going to happen?
Yes. Everyone here will understand, I think, that IPO is a constant source of discussion in many, or if not most, private companies. It's always there. And it has always been there since the day I joined ICEYE. Are we going to do it? If we're going to do it, when? Where? All those things. Over the last, let's say, year, that conversation in ICEYE has taken on much more relevance because of the speed which we've been expanding, because of, I think, the reality of the world that we're now in. This sort of defence and security environment we've got, it's going to carry on. It's not going to stop anytime soon, even if, and let's hope that the Ukraine situation gets solved sooner rather than later. It doesn't mean it's all just going to revert back to the way it was before. It's not. It's going to carry on. So for at least 5, probably 10, even longer years. So ICEYE is now looking at that world, along with the civil activities we've got, seeing the demand that we've got, looking at it thinking, well, is that something that is now something we ought to focus more on? And as our CEO and founder has alluded to recently, that now has become a fairly significant topic in the leadership team. Obviously, I can not say whether or not that's going to happen and when, but I'll leave it there.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Steve. I think we've hopefully got enough time for a few questions from the audience before we hand back to Mark.
Yep. Okay, right. Hands up. Who's first? Any questions? Here we go. Charles.
Charlie Murphy, Singer Capital Markets. Can you talk a bit about how the contracts work? And when you do a sovereign contract, is this for 5 years, for 8 years? How often you have to replace the satellites? Just give us a sense of the sort of how the business mechanics work as opposed to the excellent technology.
Yes, sure. A typical contract for a satellite mission, let's say it's 5 or 6 satellites, something like that. Maybe it's 100, 150 million, something like this. Within that contract, you have support. You've got supplementary data coming off our own constellation. You've got a longer-term training and development and so on. So a 5-year contract is not unusual in those terms. And we design our satellites to have a lifetime of around about 5 years. Now, why? Well, batteries wear out, components wear out. Actually, technology improves. Technology develops very, very quickly. We look at it and say, we don't want a satellite that lasts 15 years. It's obsolete. And you can't drive everything with software. You've got to replace some of these things. And space is an incredibly harsh environment. They wear out. And if you do want a very large satellite that lasts a long time, you can have that. They're very big and they're very expensive, take a long time to build, and they take a lot of money to procure and launch. So that's not where we are. We do it in the other way. So we will replace them. And what happens, what does the structure look like? A typical contract, there is continual revenue that comes in throughout the lifetime of those contracts. It's not a sort of all up front and then that's it. So there's payment milestones going on as you deliver the satellites. There's milestones when you've commissioned the satellite in orbit and it's now working and you've handed it over to your customer. There's then ongoing support as we help them operate those things. We're upgrading because we are software driven on our radar, so we can put different modes on there. We can increase data download speeds, those sorts of things. And then you've got a training component. And on top of all of that, ICEYE is in a unique position in that we own and operate our own constellation. So we can supplement their data feed. And we've got more satellites. We own and run more satellites than any country does. So if they've got, say, 5, but actually one of their satellites is not going over the place they need to see, we can supplement that data. So we have an ongoing data contract with them. Then we bring in all the civil side as well and talk to their civil agencies and start helping out the civil side of the government too. So it's a 5-year journey with the customer, and ICEYE is very sticky in that journey. And once you've got things like a SAR processor on the ground and antenna equipment on the ground and processing capability on the ground, you tend to want to keep that and upgrade it. You don't keep chopping and changing to someone else's system. So we have longevity with the customer. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Any other questions? One right at the back over here.
Thank you. You mentioned in terms of bandwidth capabilities for resolution. Are there avenues you can explore moving forward to get satellites with higher resolution? And actually, how much does that matter versus, say, just increasing the size of the constellation, having higher refresh rates? So I suppose what I mean by that is, what do your customers prize more? Would it be incremental improvements on the image quality or faster refresh times?
Yeah, so what is it that customers are demanding? As I said earlier, we got to the legal limit of resolution. Now the kit will go more, but in the civil domain, you have to stick within the bandwidth you're allowed. Otherwise, you start interfering in other people's operations, and that's what drives the resolution. Now, is that an issue? Can I do more if I've got 15 centimeter resolution? If I've now got 10 centimeter resolution, does that make a massive difference? It makes a little bit difference. Can I do more if instead of revisiting every 4 hours, I can revisit every 10 minutes? Yes, I can do a lot more with that. So actually revisit becomes an issue. Data speed download becomes an issue. It's different in SAR. Often with optical systems, you get lots of pictures of clouds, and you have to deal with those when you get them on the ground. You don't with SAR because you know where you want to look, and you point at that, and you can see through the clouds. So typically the data you're downloading is the data you want. So I don't necessarily have to do lots of onboard processing. It will help eventually, but it's not critical. So revisit is one thing, data download is another. What's actually driving a lot of it is the data analytics. What do you do when you get this data on the ground? How quickly can you process it? How quickly can you draw out the information you want? How quickly can you get that into the hands of the person that needs it? And that's one of the reasons why we developed this shipping container, ISR cell as we call it, so it's right there. So you can take away some of the issues with, it actually takes quite a long time to shuffle data around the internet. It's not sort of instant as people think it is. It's not. It takes minutes, and that can be very critical.
One more question if there's one in the room. Anyone? Chairman's going to take his prerogative. Will. It's going to be a very hard one, this one. So hold your seat.
Myself. Yeah.
I'm the chair of Seraphim Space Investment Trust, and I don't get directly involved in the fund from the point of view of what they choose to invest in. But Steve, of the other portfolio companies that we've got, just give me 4 that you think are in the strongest position.
Great question.
And don't let them stop you answering it.
Obviously, they're all fantastic, and I think they're all going to succeed fantastically well. The number of unicorns, it's outstanding. Who would I say? What would I pick on? Look, there's some obvious players that are starting to accelerate. The journey that ICEYE has been on, which has really been right capability, right time, right team of people with the right attitude about how you put this stuff together and how you make it and scale it and do it quickly. There's other companies in the portfolio. I'd probably draw attention to Hawkeye at the moment. They're going great guns. Companies like Pixel, they've got a long way to go. Very, very similar profile to the way what ICEYE looked like and is now going. A fourth one, or was that 3? You can chip in if you wish. Say again? So, oh yes, no, absolutely. Brit company called SatView doing infrared. So there you've got, with Hawkeye, you've got RF. Pixel have got a lot of hyperspectral. And SatView have got infrared. Now, when you put all that stuff together, the next stage in the development of the Earth observation market is all of these things coming together. Look, it's great when we've got these focused companies like ICEYE and let's say SatView or Pixel or Hawkeye, who are very focused on their individual capabilities. One's doing RF, one's doing SAR, one's doing hyperspectral, one's doing infrared. Now bring that lot together. What does that look like? That's a really, really powerful capability.
Great. Well, that's a fantastic point to finish on. Data fusion is the future. Right. Well, thank you for your insights. I'm going to end with a few closing remarks. So, SpaceX is the largest private company in the world, $400 billion. And I think they're worth every penny of that. I believe it's going to become $1 trillion business. We don't invest in SpaceX, sadly. They were on the letter G of the alphabet when we launched, so they were out of scope for our investment. So we tried to invest into everything else. So what are the next two most valuable space companies in the world? Rocket Labs, which is a sort of junior version of SpaceX, and AST Space Mobile, which is putting up cell towers in space and turning the global mobile network operator industry on its head. Well, we're an investor in AST. We invested into that company in 2018, the only fund to invest prior to its IPO. I mentioned earlier that out of the 42 companies that we've invested into through our 3 funds, 2 of them private, we've achieved 7 unicorns, 5 IPOs, only 4 failures. We really believe that we're in a time now where we're going to be able to continue to identify the leaders of the future. We've shown you the systematic process that we've set up globally to enable us to be able to filter the best deals, to put them into a process through our accelerator. The best of those go into our private venture fund, and the best of those will then go into SSIT. So we believe that we're in a very strong position to not only deliver the medium-term objectives that we set at IPO, but to totally smash them. So Commander Tedman told us about the plans for UK, how important space is, the deficit that the UK has in terms of its capability, the focus on commercial, and the changes that we've had made in our procurement, now led by a commercial space guy that's selecting for all of defence for the UK. And we heard from him that that is really replicated across Europe, huge deficits in Europe. So on our doorstep, a giant opportunity that has the funding already in place, 5% of GDP for every country, every member of NATO, that's going to be spent in this particular area. And today, you can buy our fund at a 33% discount. So we believe that that discount is ridiculous. If I speak to colleagues in America, a 33% premium wouldn't be enough for a business like this. So that discount stops us being able to raise any more money, to be able to invest into this incredible market that we've got ahead of us. We already know the next 20 companies we want to invest into. They're already within our network, within our ecosystem. We don't have the money to do it. So hopefully, the insights that we've been given today and the material that we shared yesterday, particularly trying to open up the aperture about ISR and the importance of that and how we believe we've already backed the leader in each of the different segments and areas of the payloads that are going to provide the capability that is much needed by Europe, by UK, by the US, and that the companies that we indicated that have not grown in value, these are junior ICEYEs that during the course of the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years are going to grow to the same sort of scale. So thank you for your time today, and we very much welcome your support with Seraphim. So thank you.